Hi, folks. Democrats are at it again, proving that moral high ground has become their favorite form of cardio. See, every week it's like a new episode of rich people yell at other rich people for being richer than them, starring the Hollywood elite class pretending to hate capitalism while checking their stock portfolios. Case in point, Billie Eilish accepting her fancy little new award, gold award, by the way, while telling billionaires to give their fair share, shorties. Nothing says down with a system like preaching wealth redistribution while sitting on $70 million in a pile of tour profits. Something that Kamala Harris has never seen in her entire life, which is why she just called Trump gifted and said she was fascinated by him. Yeah, that's usually what happens when someone finally encounters competence for the first time. Something that Democrats are thankfully confessing they're not used to. As it was clear as day to anyone with a pair of eyes and ears during the Palisades and Eaton fires earlier this year.
The report says firefighters were ordered to leave the smoldering burn site that eventually became the deadly Palisades wildfire.
Wow.
The LA Times is obtained text messages from 3 firefighters at the scene of the Lockman fire. That fire started, of course, New Year's Day and then smoldered until January 7th, when historic winds reignited it into the Palisades fire. Federal prosecutors say that fire was intentionally set by Jonathan Rinderneck. On January 2nd, a battalion chief ordered firefighters at the scene to pull out of the area because the fire was contained. One firefighter said the chief had been told it was a bad idea to leave because the fire was still smoldering and could be rekindled. The LAFD has declined to comment on the text messages.
I love firefighters, I really do. These guys risk their lives to make sure we're safe, and I have nothing but respect for them. But this right here is a clear case of negligence. I don't see it any other way. It's purely infuriating when you think about it. There had been speculation before this story broke for months that something like this had happened, and sure enough, the texts confirm it. Firefighters at the scene told their battalion chief the fire was still smoldering, and she ordered them to pack it up and leave anyway. Before this story ever broke, there was already satellite imagery showing the fire had never been fully extinguished. So this wasn't some unforeseeable accident. This was a preventable failure from leadership. And the reason something like this happens is because so many of LA's and California's institutions, including the fire department, have lowered their standards. They've done it in the name of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. See, back in the day, everything was merit-based. We demanded the highest standards from our first responders, but Democrats have come in and hollowed that out for politics and box checking. And we all know who was running things when all this happened. The fire chief at the time was publicly celebrated not for her record or performance, but because she was the first lesbian to hold the position. That's not a knock on who she is. It's just a statement on how she got there, because leadership chosen for identity instead of merit leads exactly to this. The battalion chief also had a similar story. She was elevated because she was a black lesbian and acted in videos as though we should be proud of that instead of what her performance looks like, and clearly wasn't good. Now, all that said, I'm grateful for every firefighter out there putting their life on the line, but this tragedy is what happens when ideology replaces competence and when leadership is chosen based on virtue signaling points instead of actual ability to fight fires. And since we're on the topic of DEI hires, Kamala Harris, the first ever DEI presidential candidate, is still going around and coping that she lost.
The debate that came before with Biden and Trump, it was so apparently clear that this was not okay. And it felt like the whole of the Democratic side of politics was pretending everything was okay. That's kind of my observation from the UK. I was like, why are they all pretending everything's fine? But this was clearly an individual that was very much struggling with articulation, with ideas. And in the face of someone like Trump, who, to his credit, is able to pounce on that, to be very quick.
And he, interestingly enough, because of course I watched that debate very closely for many, many reasons, including I had 4 interviews right after his debate.
Okay.
To speak on behalf of the president during the debate. And what was interesting in that debate was also to watch how it's a very rare circumstance that you see Donald Trump actually moderate. It was fascinating.
Oh, it was?
You must have known. You must have. You sat there. You were in LA at the time, right?
I was in LA at the Fairmont Hotel.
Watching.
And
what was going on?
Taking vigorous notes. I had ordered...
You can
like they had a little crudité plate, and I was like, no, this is a pizza night. I ordered pizza for everyone. I had a number of people with me, but I had a tight group of people with me in the room. He called me from debate camp. The president did, Biden did. And I could tell something was a little off. And I was concerned about, I don't think he wanted to debate, is my point. He didn't want that debate.
So because Biden didn't want to debate, we're now supposed to believe that's why he failed against Trump? These people are out of their minds, which is hilarious, coming from the same administration that spent years calling Trump a threat to democracy. She's now somehow admitting what the rest of us saw in real time, that Biden was clearly deteriorating during that debate. Seriously? You're interacting with this man every single day for hours on end for years, and you didn't notice he couldn't even finish a sentence or walk anywhere without a handler? You didn't notice the teleprompter dependency, the constant notes, the auto pen signatures on official documents? Come on. The truth is, this whole thing exposes how much of Washington runs on straight up gaslighting. The Democrat establishment saw Biden collapsing in plain sight, and instead of intervening, they gaslit the country into pretending everything was fine because power mattered more than honesty. This is all damage control, folks. It's the slow pivot of a party realizing that their emperor has had no teleprompter for the longest time, and they couldn't keep lying about it because the American people saw it. We saw it with our own eyes.
Strategy
really
is he leads with.
That's exactly right.
He's a master labeler, Sleepy Joe. You know, you can't.
He is very gifted. Don't discount the guy in terms of that.
How do you beat someone playing that game?
You have to be relentless on focusing on what's actually happening.
Does that work?
And it means also deconstructing so that, I mean, one of the things, for example, that I've been talking about recently is,
oh my God,
there's a word that applies so well to him in this era, which is a phrase, gaslighting.
Oh my God. First off, you didn't beat him. You lost miserably. One of the worst political flops in modern history. The debate wasn't even close either. And yet Kamala Harris is out here talking as though she somehow triumphed. You lost the debate, you lost the election, and you spent the last few years on what can only be described as a national loser tour, trying to convince everyone that you actually did well. You didn't. And now you're calling Trump gifted and talking about gaslighting? That's the irony, because that's exactly what this is, gaslighting. Democrats have spent years painting Trump as a fascist, an existential threat to democracy, and now suddenly Harris admits he's very gifted and shouldn't be discounted. What this really exposes is how performative and hollow their rhetoric has been all along. The Democrat Party built its entire identity around fear-mongering and moral panic, not results or ideas. And now, when that narrative collapses, they have no foundation left, just the language of power trying to rewrite reality. It's not political strategy anymore, it's narrative maintenance. And when you have to gaslight a nation to preserve your illusion of victory, you've already lost far more than an election. You lost credibility.
I was in a state of shock.
Really? Did you think the day before that you were going to win the election?
I did.
Yeah,
sure you did.
And so when did the proverbial penny drop?
When I got a call from my campaign manager that it looks like we need 200,000 more votes that we can't find.
Election fraud.
Meaning it's just the map, the numbers.
Yeah.
And the thing I kept saying over and over again, I was in a state of shock. I was.
Oh, you were, huh?
I was so inarticulate, maybe very articulate. What I kept saying over and over again is, my God, my God, my God.
Really?
Over and over. I couldn't stop. I haven't felt that emotion, anything similar to the emotion I felt that day and for quite some time, other than the grief I felt when my mother died. I knew what was going to happen to our country.
Oh, my God.
I knew the harm that was going to happen to people. And I knew it. I knew what was going to happen.
What is this lady even talking about? Internal polling showed she was going to lose, and lose badly. Yet Kamala Harris is out here comparing election night to the grief of her mother's death, as if her personal disappointment is some national tragedy. She says she knew what was going to happen to the country, as though her loss marked the beginning of America's downfall. But let's be honest. She and Joe Biden were the downfall. They presided over record inflation, collapsing real wages, and a border chaos that is unimaginable. Plus, violent crime surging in major cities, and a foreign policy so weak it emboldened every hostile actor on the planet. They shut down domestic energy, flooded the economy with reckless spending, and left working Americans holding the bill. So when Kamala says she knew harm was coming to people, she's right. She just got the timeline wrong. The harm came when her party took power and decided ideology mattered more than competence. So what we're watching here isn't actually a reflection. It's just pure narcissism. Democrats confuse their personal power with the nation's health. And when they lose, they mistake accountability for some form of apocalypse.
I think we should reduce voting age to 16.
Of course.
I'll tell you why.
Why?
So Gen Z, they're age about 13 through 27. They've only known the climate crisis.
Come
they
on,
missed
dude.
substantial parts of their education because of the pandemic.
Because of you!
If they're in high school or college, especially in college, it is very likely that whatever they've chosen as their major for study may not result in an affordable wage.
Because of you!
They've coined the term climate anxiety
You
to describe
coined it.
fear of not only being able to buy a home, but that fear will be wiped out by extreme weather, but fear of
You've
having
done
children.
this! You created this!
It is expected that Gen Z will have 10 to 12 jobs in their lifetime.
It's you,
They are a larger
lady!
number than boomers.
You made this!
There's a specific generation of people who are going to impact our nation and the world. And I think we must invest in them, but I think that they are rightly impatient with a lot of what is the tradition of leadership right now.
Take accountability.
And if they were able to vote, because they know
Drop the word
everything
salad.
that's happening right now is going to impact them more than anybody older than them for the most part.
Well, they would not vote for
in
you.
terms of how these systems work. If they're voting right now at 16 and up, they're going to be talking about the importance of climate. They're going to be talking about the importance of figuring out how AI is going to affect the future of the workforce. They're going to be focused on what are we really doing about affordable housing.
It's actually rich that this is the point Kamala Harris is trying to make. First off, the idea that Gen Z is universally progressive is a myth. A growing share of young people are becoming politically disillusioned with the left, especially as they start working, paying rent, and seeing just how much of their paycheck goes to fund bureaucrats like this lady who does nothing but sit on her butt and talk about how she's a victim. This whole climate anxiety narrative is another made-up piece of Democrat rhetoric, manufactured fear designed to justify expanding government control and lowering the voting age to include the most emotionally manipulated demographic in the country. None of it is real in the sense that it reflects an objective crisis. It's a psychological one created by nonstop doomsday propaganda pushed through schools, social media, and Democrat entertainment. Democrats own all of these cultural institutions. And they know it. That's why they want 16-year-olds voting, because they've spent a decade shaping their worldview before they've even filed the first tax return. Meanwhile, the people who actually work, pay taxes, own homes, and run businesses, those with real stakes in the country tend to lean Republican. The moment they realize how much of their money is being taken to fund ideological vanity projects this woman loves. That's why more people argue the voting age should be raised to 21, or at least tied to some real investment in the country. When you contribute, you vote differently. When you don't, you vote for more handouts. And Kamala knows exactly which group she's trying to capture before reality hits them. And speaking of reality, somebody who clearly doesn't live in reality is Billie Eilish, who recently said this while receiving a golden statue.
Love you all, but there's a few people in here that have a lot more money than me. And if you're a billionaire, why are you a billionaire?
Why are you so jelly?
No hate, but yeah, give your money away, shorties. Love you guys. Thank you so much.
Huh? The basis for Democrat angst could never be clearer than this, folks. Billie Eilish literally said, they have more money than me. That's what this redistribution politics always comes down to. Jealousy dressed up as morality. It's not about justice or compassion. It's resentment marketed as virtue. And here she is, worth around $70 million, standing on stage, holding a golden trophy, lecturing people richer than her about giving their money away. Bro, you're not struggling. You are the system. You're a multimillionaire product of the very capitalist machine you pretend to scorn. And yet this is the modern Democrat gospel. Condemn success publicly while cashing the checks privately. It's the moral performance of envy, not empathy. What we're seeing is a cultural rot of post-wealth guilt, where privilege buys indulgence through self-flagellation, and giving back becomes a brand, not a belief. Eilish is just saying out loud what her generation has been taught, that prosperity itself is suspect and that moral worth now depends on how loudly you apologize for having it. It is actually unfortunate that Democrats have brainwashed an entire generation to believe they can't build anything, can't own anything, and can't even start a life without the government holding their hand. It's psychological warfare disguised as compassion, and at some point it crosses into something criminal. There should be a reckoning, a political Nuremberg moment of sorts, where every member of the DSA and every weak Democrat who let these radicals hijack their party is held accountable for what they've done to this country. They spent decades trying to dismantle the very things that make America beautiful and amazing: independence, ambition, and pride and achievement. These people are anti-American to the core. They hate prosperity because it proves them wrong. They hate freedom because it can't be controlled. And they hate this country because it reminds them of everything their ideology can never create. So the question is, how long will we keep letting people who despise America define what it means to be an American? How long before we stop apologizing for success and start defending the spirit that built this nation in the first place? You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.